Welcome to the Boom Bap Kingdom. Yo, peace and welcome to the Boom Bap Kingdom. We're here and we're super chilling, and I hope you guys are chilling too. Yo, check this out. I come from the era of analog mixing, where everything ran through a mixing board. You may have had some patch bays involved. Guitars were connected to DA boxes. We used to mic drums. Before I made beats and became more of a producer, I was a recording engineer. So I actually went to school for recording way back in 90, 91, 92. In those days, obviously, 99% of what you did was analog. In the beginning, sampling and all of that was really just starting to come into fruition. It was coming into its own. So MIDI existed. Sampling was really starting to become a thing that was understood, etc., etc. But before the production, for me, I was a recording engineer. And in those days, things were a little simpler to understand. To me, it was pretty straightforward. When you fast forward to today, it could be a little daunting. So let's go back a little bit. Some of you guys who have been subscribed to the channel or watching for a while knew or may have seen the Tascam Model 24 board that used to sit in the back over here. And that's essentially an analog board with a USB digital audio interface. So you can connect all of your keyboard samplers, etc., directly to the board, and then the USB cable goes to your computer, and you could get 24 ins, 24 outs, etc. So I was using that because that really seemed very straightforward for me. And I have a lot of samplers, so I can put left, right, out on channel 1 and 2 and kind of go down the line with all the samplers that I had in here. Needless to say, the board failed multiple times, but I was also flirting with the idea of going more into a hybrid setup, because I found myself mixing more in the DAW and not really on the board. I would use a little bit of compression from the channel strip, or maybe a little bit of EQ, maybe a little bit of reverb, but primarily I was mixing in the DAW. So for me, the Model 24 didn't really make much sense based on my workflow, and I decided to pretty much go hybrid after it failed. So what does that mean? Because a lot of you guys only focus on making beats, but you really don't focus on the recording side. I focus on both. What that means to go hybrid: you're recording into your DAW, but you're also sending signal to analog outboard gear and then back into your DAW. One way, shape, or form. Maybe you're going from the DAW to the analog gear and then back into the DAW, or you're going through the analog gear directly into the DAW. But there's some analog gear involved, and then there's some digital plugins, a DAW of some sort involved. Now, for me to go hybrid, it took some thought and some research, and there were things I wish I knew before fully pulling the trigger. I kind of had an idea of what I needed. I bought everything I thought I needed, but the setup was a little bit more complicated than I anticipated. So these are the things that I wish I knew before going hybrid in my studio. Number one, before transitioning from digital mixing on a board to hybrid, focus on hardware DAW integration. So you need to understand simple things like gain staging for your hardware, plan for proper cable management, and consider your budget, because some of these things can be very expensive if you get into certain interfaces and certain DAW controllers. Obviously, I went hybrid, so I went with an audio interface, and I went with DAW controllers, which are the things that look like mixing boards behind me, but those really give me a lot of tactile control of the DAW, so I don't have to mix with my mouse, because I don't like working like that. Keep your budget for your interfaces in mind. They can get very expensive, and you're going to want to build a system around your workflow. So what's important to you? You just making beats, and you want some analog flavor, or you making beats and recording vocals, understand your workflow before you just like jump right in. The other thing I wish I understood a little bit more was the signal flow. So hybrid setups require a very clear understanding of how all of your hardware is going to connect. So things have to go from the outside world into the computer, then back out and then back in, right? So it's it's pretty bugged out depending on how you're using your hybrid gear, but that is essentially the idea. So understanding how you want your signal to flow is very important. Another thing I wish I knew was, and I did know this because I knew what I wanted, I did research, but I will say another thing that's important to know is choosing a really powerful audio interface. Powerful doesn't necessarily mean expensive, like it super breaks the pockets. Having a really good audio interface, having something with at least 8 ins and 8 outs. I would say something with ADAT, because if you have a lot of gear, plus if you have microphones, and then you have outboard gear, you need to have enough IO to connect all that stuff. So that's important. Cable management. This is something that you're going to have to really think about, because in some cases, you're going to have more cables in a hybrid setup than you would if you just had an analog/digital mixing board. If you do a hybrid setup, you're going to have a lot more cables. So cable management in your studio is going to be really important for you. So keep that in mind as well. You might want to wrap cables, etc. And we'll use that to segue into the next item. So the reason why cable management is pretty important is because you need to understand a couple of things. First, you need to understand patch bays. More times than not, in a hybrid setup, you will have a patch bay, because all of this outboard gear has to have somewhere to go, and then it has to have a way to get back into your interface. And typically everything you have is going to get connected to the patch bay, and then the patch bay is connected to the interface. This is how you can route signals from one place to another to hit the outboard gear and then go back into the DAW. So the cable management comes into play because you need to have a knowledge of patch bays, and patch bays require quite a bit of cabling. You're going to be using patch cables. Also understanding inserts, especially in your DAW. I was used to hardware inserts, and an insert on your mixing board is really a way for you to break the signal on that channel. So for instance, let's say I have channel 1 on my analog board, and there's an insert jack on there. I can insert an effect unit. So what'll happen is the signal flow will hit that effect unit and then go back down the channel and then out of the speakers. So I'm very used to that, but understanding how to set up inserts in my DAW was a little bugged out for me. So I figured it out. Again, you're going to be reading a lot. You'll be doing a little bit of research because you have to figure these things out for your DAW. Another thing to really understand about a hybrid setup, some people mix completely in the box, right? They do everything in the DAW and they have zero outboard gear, maybe just their samplers and stuff and their interface, and they're routing all that audio into the DAW, and they use a bunch of plugins, and that's fantastic. But when you're ready to implement outboard gear, that gets different, because the beauty of mixing in the box is recallability. When you save that project in your DAW, you can go back to that project in 6 months and open it up, and everything is going to be the way you saved it. Outboard gear doesn't work that way. And by outboard gear, we're really talking about compressors, maybe outboard EQs, preamps, things like that. We're talking about dials and knobs, and you're going to be touching hardware and doing your settings to taste and things of that nature. And that stuff is not going to automatically recall. So if those settings are changing often from session to session, you're going to need to use recall sheets or some sort of method of recording those settings for each session. Now, a pro tip is a lot of pro engineers will go to their compressors and, like, for instance, they'll pretty much dial in the settings they want and kind of keep it that way. Or they'll say, hey, we're going to do vocals on this compressor, and they'll know what those settings are. They'll dial that in real quick, right, for the vocal track, and they know what the ratio is, etc. If you keep it dialed in, then it's easy for you to do with less fuss, and you won't necessarily need the recall sheets and stuff. But if you don't have settings dialed in that you use on a regular basis, then you have to think about recallability. Most of the time for me, I'm printing that signal to the DAW, so it's already going to be baked into the recording session. So now with hybrid setups, there are some really dope benefits. And for me, the main benefit is exploring the warmth that you get from analog gear. Some people are going to say, yeah, there's no audible difference between plugins and analog gear. Some people will say that. Some people will say the difference is vast. What I can say from my experience is I'm comparing this studio to what it was previously when I was running everything through the Tascam Model 24. And for me, I have had a vast improvement. My vocals sound way better. They're warmer. My beats sound way better. I improved tremendously with my sound. I love the way it sounds in here. Everything is coming out exactly the way I want it, and it's just getting better because I'm getting better, right? I'm still learning how to mix this way and record this way. To me, that is like the number one benefit. And for me, it was noticeable. Some people say they don't notice it so much. Some people notice it a lot, like me. And some people just, swear by the whole analog thing. That's a whole different conversation. Me personally, I use both, right? I use my outboard gear as well as some plugins, and I'm getting an amazing sound in here. So to me, that's the number one benefit. The other thing that's really dope too is that a hybrid studio is kind of always ready to go. So once you kind of dial in your outboard gear, you get everything set up. Like I have my control surfaces dialed into my DAW. So when I'm pushing faders or turning knobs or scrubbing the audio, all of that is dialed in. My DAW is following along with every move I make on my control surface. So it really feels like I'm in a true recording studio analog space. It doesn't feel different, like I'm not on an analog board or anything like that. It just worked out better for me. I just took my time and I thought about the things I'm saying to you guys now. A couple of these things like the patch bay and that kind of stuff, I had to kind of work through that as I was setting it up. Those are the things I wish I knew before going hybrid, and I hope that this video helps you guys out. So listen, Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. Also, check out my new podcast with my man Seventh Touch over there at the Abstract Rhythm Cafe. It's called What's in the Backpack, featuring the Boom Bap Kingdom and the Abstract Rhythm Cafe. We build on all things producer, beat making, hip hop, culture, etc., etc. That's a real dope place to go to get real conversation like this. And you hear two guys in similar but different spaces building and talking about it. Cipher Dialect is out right now, the whole album. Go stream that. Street Skholarz on the boombapkingdom.com, soon to be hitting all streaming platforms as well. And we got the new sample packs coming. Everything is coming, man. Get in those comments. Let me know what you think about this video, if this is information that's helping you, and if you want me to expound on anything in that list. So with that being said, I'm going to leave you guys with a BBK salute. Peace.